This episode of Going In Raw is sponsored by the new DraftKings Pick6 app. Do you think that a particular quarterback is going to throw for more than 300 yards? Or that a wide receiver is going to score a touchdown?
Then check out DraftKings Pick6, the newest way to compete against others and play fantasy football to win cash with DraftKings. With the DraftKings Pick6 app, just pick a player and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more. Get your picks correct and you'll win cash.
So download the new DraftKings Pick6 app now and use code RAW. That's code RAW for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick6 credits guaranteed, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires 9/19. Only on DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. One per new customer. Reward issued as $50 in non-withdrawable Pick6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms. Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to. We're doing things a little bit different this week, so full disclosure, it's kind of an informal pilot season for me and Larson. We noticed that there's no pay-per-views for like 3 weeks on the agenda, and so we were thinking of ideas to mix it up a little bit, throw out some new content. We know you love the NXT reviews, and those are going to stay, but they're going to be bundled with the AEW review on Thursdays, and I'll be sure, darn it, to put time codes in, so people who want to skip the AEW stuff and head straight to the NXT thoughts, you can do that. But over at the Friendo Club Wrestling channel, we do a show called Reacting to Hot Takes. Several wrestling channels out there do it. And one thing we noticed about it is that A, it's one of our stronger performers, and B, oftentimes the length of the recording becomes podcast length. And so we're like, you know what? We're looking for another show kind of like Count Out where we can just rely on it to be a staple piece of programming that'll do the kind of numbers that we want them to do from a business perspective. Also, it's got the added benefit of having community involvement, and it's something that we can have some fun with here on main channel. And so we're going to look at your hot takes in the world of wrestling today. We pulled these from the Friendo Club Wrestling channel community thread. From here on out, as long as we're doing this, we're going to put the threads right here at the Steven Larson YouTube channel. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notify bell.
Yep. Congratulations on Hot Takes to getting the main roster call-up. I can't even talk. I had this bit and I ruined it.
It was a good bit too. It's a really good bit.
Congrats to Hot Takes for the main roster call-up. There, better the second time.
The next draft, the next person who's being drafted in the Hot Takes. No, okay. Mine was even worse. How about that? I made you feel better. Anyways, where do you want to start with these?
Let's start off with this one. I imagine this is probably going to be the thumbnail because it's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah.
Tacoma Streetcar Disaster.
Great name.
Hot take. The Monday Night Wars permanently ruined wrestling's fandom. It was a fun time to watch, but instilled countless fans with toxic mentalities that their favorite promotion needs to kill the others. 20 years of WB produced propaganda framing their monopolization of American pro wrestling as a good thing made things worse. There's a lot to digest here. There's a lot to discuss.
Especially as two people who, were watching wrestling.
And in your case, your formative kind of wrestling experience.
I was basically introduced to not pro wrestling necessarily, but when we were kids, pro wrestling was digested a bit different. It wasn't necessarily the serialized Monday Night Raw thing that happened in '93. It was like, here's Superstars, where we're going to show you a bunch of rando ass matches from, the circuits, and then you get like some random, Saturday night main events where actual story beats happen, and then you get pay-per-views like 2 times a year. By the time college came around and my new friends group was watching wrestling, NWO was popping off, and I was like, oh, okay. And there was a concerted effort from WWF and WCW to aim, for that college crowd, and they sucked me right into it.
Yeah.
So that's
correct.
our background.
That's the background. I mean, my background goes further than that. It's the mid '80s stuff. That's when I got into it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I fell out, came back in during the Attitude Era, like a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So even where to start here? So we have had a good number of years. I mean, how many different documentaries has WB produced?
Let me start here because I think I know a good starting point here.
Sure.
Do you think, because I've had this discussion, I know on Wrestle Juice, and maybe we've had it before, I don't know. In real time back then, during the Monday Night Wars, did you feel, and obviously things are different now because of social media, but amongst our friend group anyways, there was no amount of this one's better, screw you. There was not much toxicity amongst our friends group anyways, as it pertained to, it wasn't like, oh, you're a WWF guy. Oh, you're a WCW guy.
You're not my friend anymore. Yeah, there's none of that.
Yeah,
there was, here's the thing. There were several times where Eric Bischoff was like, hey, we're going to stick it to WB and spoil what happens on their show, on our show. And so between the two companies, there was that attitude that it was eat or be eaten,
They tried to get that across for sure.
Yeah, they did, definitely. And especially when WCW was kind of the insurgent brand, trying to make headway, over the established WB product, they were trying everything, and that was including just literally spoiling their entire show. You don't have to turn over to that station. Stay here and watch our product. That was kind of their attitude.
Do you think, let me ask you this real quick. Do you think, you know how things kind of snowball? Just, hey, we're fighting these guys, they're fighting us. I feel like there was a lot of real, like, as bad as spoiling results is, I feel like that's nothing compared to what it would possibly be today if WWE had actual head-to-head gnarly competition. Because AEW, they settled into where they're at, which is, still to this day, a good million viewers plus, less in the total overall viewership than what Monday Night Raw does, which is also less than what SmackDown does.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, when I think back on it, spoiling results as part of your broadcast team is low down, but it was usually kind of a throw. Oh, this is what's happening over on the other channel. Now let's go back to the ring where Norman Smiley is. It seems like they actually, compared to what they probably maybe could have been doing.
Oh, I don't know. When Shivani says, we hear Mick Foley won the WWE title, that'll put butts in seats.
I know. I just feel like it could have gotten so much worse.
Oh, it could have gotten uglier. Absolutely. And if something like that happened today where somehow AEW was getting 1.5 million viewers per episode of their product, you think the online toxicity is bad now?
Oh, it would be so much worse.
It would be doubly unbearable, and that would extend, I think, to both products to a certain degree.
I think it would. I think it'd probably get pretty nasty. I do remember this, though. I remember when we were watching back then, we used to watch WCW live, and then afterwards we watched Raw until Stone Cold won the title. Part of that, though,
let me interject here. Part of that, though, is that Nitro ran at 5 p.m. on the West Coast. It was live nationwide. Mm-hmm. Raw didn't start on the West Coast till 8. So we watched WCW.
Oh, we didn't have the option to watch it live. Man, I swear I thought we did a flipperoo and started watching
I just
Raw
think we decided we're going to watch Raw first and then we'll do Nitro later.
Oh, so you think we actually didn't watch until 8 o'clock?
Could be.
That maybe that's the case. I do remember around when Stone Cold won the title, there was a flip amongst us in general that oh, this is better. This is just better now. And WCW wasn't as better, even though we were still, I remember being bizarrely kind of interested in oh, Ultimate Warriors and WCW. Wow, that's awesome. And then it was this is horrible.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Let's take a break here. Get a word from the sponsor of today's show, DraftKings Pick6, Steve. I'm a huge sports nerd, and I play a ton of fantasy football, which means I really pay attention to matchups. I'll look at the schedule and think, you know what? Think of this quarterback here. They're going to throw for a bunch of yards against this team. Or, there's a certain wide receiver, got a great matchup, likely to score a touchdown this week.
Well, Larson, then you should check out DraftKings Pick6, the newest way to compete against others and play fantasy football to win cash with DraftKings. See the DraftKings Pick6 app. All you got to do is pick a player and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more. Get your picks right and you win cash.
So download the new DraftKings Pick6 app now and use code RAW. That's code RAW for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick6 credits guaranteed. Plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires 9/19 only on DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. One per new customer. Reward issued as $50 in non-withdrawable Pick6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at NFL.com/terms.
I guess let's talk about this for a minute, because this could be an interesting conversation. The aspect of WWE producing, there is that spell where they were producing documentary after documentary after documentary. They had the rise and fall of ECW. They had the one about WCW, the one about Ultimate Warrior, but that's not necessarily salient to the conversation here. And it's kind of the overall view of WWE. You can talk about the Ruthless Aggression documentary, which is complete revisionist history.
Yeah.
Where it was WWE is the established brand. We are the brand name of pro wrestling. Others try, they fail when it comes to toppling us. And the industry is better because WWE is on top.
Yeah, that sort of idea, while not maybe explicit, is never.
It was
challenged.
the undercurrent for a lot of stuff.
It was, and it's never been challenged. It's always been kind of like nobody in any of their documentaries were like, I mean, I don't know, maybe nobody in the WCW from WCW side in that documentary said anything about competition being better.
I don't recall. It's been a while since I've seen it.
It has been a while since I've seen it. They might have let something like that fly, but you're right. In general, for the most part, it's, history is written by the victors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now that we have a brand that's trying to gain some measure of foothold on cable television, something a brand hasn't done in the world of pro wrestling in a very long time, with AEW, challenging the narrative that the strength of the wrestling business is tied to the strength of WWE. And the fortunes of the wrestling industry are tied to the fortunes of WWE. Now we just saw it recently with the whole idea about Swerve's contract. Whether that sentiment within WWE was truthful or not, it was still an interesting conversation.
And amongst the fandom, amongst the super sweaties, Danny Garcia's not worth that. Swerve's not worth. What do you fucking know what they're worth?
Exactly. Know what they're worth? What someone's willing to pay them.
Exactly.
That's what they're worth.
Yeah.
But going back to All Out 2021, where Danielson, Adam Cole showed up in AEW, and we've talked endlessly about that show and what potential importance that has and could have had. And at the moment, it felt like it was a fulcrum point where AEW was actually a challenger when it comes to bringing in talent.
Sure, yeah.
Having WWE stars come and sign with them. And not just people who were in WWE who just didn't fare as well as expected, but you had WrestleMania main eventers like Bryan Danielson leaving WWE to come to AEW. You had Adam Cole, who had headlined a number of takeovers in NXT, who seemed, in the right creative circumstances, poised for probably a pretty successful main roster run had he not been billed to be a manager for Keith Lee on the main roster.
That was the rumor, yeah.
That was the rumor. He's going to cut his hair, change his name.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a place for Miro to go to show, hey, this is what I could really do in the right environment. Mm-hmm. This is a place where people who are at the peak of their careers, not just in terms of what they're doing in ring, but in terms of what they're doing creatively, have now an option. I mean, even going back to Jon Moxley, he didn't want to re-sign with W because he thought his creative was shit.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, but he was one of the most popular stars in the company. He left. He went to AEW.
Yeah.
He seems to be completely happy there. Seemingly has no intentions of leaving anytime soon. He signed a huge deal within the last couple of years. And, you know, we have had this kind of undercurrent in the wrestling industry for a number of years that WWE is at the top, and that's the way it should be, and that's what's best for the pro wrestling industry. You have a brand challenging that on one front in terms of being able to sign talent to lucrative contracts that could either match or outpace what WWE is willing to offer them. And, you know, if people are so used to the idea, well, WWE is the pinnacle of pro wrestling in the world, then they might be taken aback by a company that's like, no, we're trying to carve out our piece of this business and do so in a way that ultimately is better for wrestlers because they'll get paid more money.
I think AEW also, you know, here's one of the problems, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say one of the problems. So I think the toxicity between the two companies, between the two fandoms, if you will. Number one, I hesitate to say that anything's necessarily been ruined, but obviously in pro wrestling, God, it's almost impossible. I mean, especially the main sort of arm of social media within wrestling, of course, is Twitter. And it's so difficult to be on there these days. It's just garbage. It really
how much
is.
Of that is extension. I didn't frequent the message boards and chat rooms in 98, 99, 2000, or, you know, the Observer message boards around then. I don't know what the environment was like back then.
Probably wasn't great, but
it probably wasn't great. And I wonder how much of that, if any, is kind of a carryover to today. I mean, obviously, it takes a little effort to hop on Twitter and then just start voicing your opinion.
Well,
I don't know
okay,
if
so
the means of entry for message boards was vastly different back then, but the reach wasn't nearly as great.
I think one thing about Twitter, though, also is that obviously, especially now over the past couple of months, you know, the algorithm there is suited for negativity. It wants to push you, rage bait, whatever you want to call it, that you'll engage with because it wants engagement to fluff up its numbers. It's not like, you know, a true conversation or you know, it might have had an opportunity at being the town square, but, you know, Elon Musk has pretty much ruined any idea that that's going to be the case.
Yep.
But I honestly think that it's two things. It's number one, Vince had run WWE's creative into the ground so bad that by the time AEW came around, there was optimism amongst fans who were sick of the WWE shit. At the same time, there are always going to be loyals to WWE, and WWE had an arm that people did appreciate from a critical standpoint. That was NXT. And you see where so much of that prime NXT class of like 2017, 2018, they ended up going to AEW. And so you had, you know, the hubris and arrogance of Vince McMahon running his creative into the ground, which is a volatile situation. Then you have AEW coming in, which the founders of which were kind of built a little bit of their legacy on the BTE stuff, which was a lot of snark aimed towards WWE. Add to that, Tony Khan hasn't always exactly been a guy who's afraid to talk shit about the competition. And you have the recipe for this fandom that is sort of turned into what it is. And I don't necessarily know that the Monday Night Wars were the cause of that. I mean, look, we've seen other wrestling promotions like TNA, you know, they've been around forever. And I wasn't huge into message boards or whatever back in 2002 when they came up, but I don't really remember. And again, it's different because there's no social media, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of the same tack that TNA had back then was not too dissimilar from AEW.
No,
like there are plenty of people throwing shots at WWE back then.
Every time someone come to TNA from WWE, they would open their TNA program with the bitter former WWE talent promo.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That was kind of the formula at
the
time.
template at that point, yeah.
You know, and whether it's been stated explicitly and uncurrent a subtext to some of the stuff, or just kind of a general sentiment for people who grew up watching WWE, who associate pro wrestling with WWE so strongly, who have so many memories, whether it's from, you know, when they were kids to whether they were in college to adults, whatever, tied in with what WWE has offered over the last 40, 50 years. You know, there is a lot of brand loyalty kind of overall in this country. And, you know, to think that pro wrestling would necessarily be immune from that, you know, it seems doubtful. It seems pretty obvious that's not the case if you go on social media, though. There's a lot of people, for whatever reason, extremely loyal to whether it be WWE or AEW.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
The flip side of when we were talking about the competition aspect of it. Mm-hmm. If AEW was firing on all cylinders and it was everything in that company was on the level of Hangman versus Swerve.
Yeah.
Everything was getting super positive buzz. Everything was, because AEW went through a long stretch where it was like, hey, let's throw a bunch of people out there to have really good matches. Look, we all like really good matches, but your product starts to get a little stale when that you only offer one ingredient of the entire, you know, dish of pro wrestling. If AEW was crushing it and their numbers were comparable to WWE, you might see more fierce competition from WWE. But I wonder if the fan base would react in a different way.
I don't know, because there's, you know, it's the idea that so many people were excited about the prospect of AEW because they thought they wanted an alternative to WWE, but when in fact they just wanted WWE to be good.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you had AEW firing on all cylinders and getting $1.5 million for Dynamite, and you had WWE in its current state, you know, it's still kind of on the upswing from the post-Vince days. I don't know. I kind of feel like that both sides would probably become at least, you know, as it would seem on social media. Like the thing about the social media discourse about wrestling, it's a small subset. I kind of feel like it's not wrestling fandom writ large.
No, I don't. I agree with that too. Yeah.
There's so many people. Anytime CM Punk makes the AEW reference in WWE and it's crickets.
Yeah.
It's obvious that most of that crowd there either doesn't know or doesn't care what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So to think that what the toxic discourse you see on social media as it relates to wrestling is widespread, I don't think that's the case. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't give you a percentage because I don't know. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, if both companies were operating at peak potential and putting out tremendous content week after week and getting really good numbers, I kind of feel like the stalwarts would be even more entrenched.
You think it'd be even worse?
Probably, because then you have AEW, not just kind of an upstart who's getting $500,000 a week. Well, now they're getting $1.5 million. That's more of a threat to me as WWE loyalist, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I'm not a WWE loyalist, by the way. I'm just using that as an example.
Well, I'm trying to remember, and I know it's always been bad. I'm not naive. I understand that. But like, you know, one of the things about AEW was they showed up with such peacocking. You know, they showed up with such, you know, oh, look at us now. We're going to do WWE better than WWE does. Because look, let's face it, they did, you know, everybody's kind of taken, besides like Lucha Underground when they were around, but you know, the WWE formula is something that AEW has adopted in terms of their television presentation.
Yeah,
you know, there are backstage segments, there are interviews,
yeah.
There are wrestling matches that happen and the cameras look a certain way. It's not like they're reinventing the wheel. It's not even like New Japan, who, has a much more sports-based presentation. But when AEW first started and they were doing over 1 million, and it looked like, oh, there might be a trajectory here where Raw, which was terrible at the time, there might be a flip-flop, and that didn't happen largely because Vince was gone, and on top of that, AEW's creative just stopped being as compelling, and so the numbers fell off. They didn't know how to handle Cody Rhodes. They didn't know how to handle CM Punk. Like, they didn't know how to do that. They could not, maximize the most out of their wrestlers. And that's something that WWE has had problems with for a very long time. And Triple H seems to be getting better at that. But Vince half the time didn't know how to maximize the potential of his wrestlers either. Look at Roman Reigns for the first 5 years of his career.
Look at the Revival. Look at so many.
Look at it. There's a million.
Aleister Black, Miro.
Yeah,
I can go on and on. Andrade. Go on and on just in the last 5 or 10 years.
The entirety of that NXT 2018, 2019 class. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I don't know if you had two companies that were just absolutely killing it and having a great time, and making money hand over fist and doing incredibly well in the ratings. And it was,
I don't think wrestling fans would be like, these are the halcyon days of pro wrestling.
Really? You don't think they'd chill the fuck
relax
out
and just enjoy it? No. Well, here, the small subset of fans that go on social media and be hecka toxic. No, they would double down, man. Like I said, WWE loyalists will see AEW as an existential threat to their beloved WWE because they're encroaching on their numbers. Therefore, toxicity.
I do think that the second part of this statement here is more relevant than the first one. I don't honestly think the Monday Night Wars had much to do with it, but I do absolutely think 20 years of WWE produced propaganda.
Here's the thing. The existence of the Monday Night Wars and the competition between WWE and WCW, no. The fact that WWE came out the winner and bought their competition, thus perpetuating the narrative that WWE existing as a virtual pro wrestling monopoly in the United States is good for pro wrestling, yes, that's an issue.
Do you think if WCW won, there would be equally as propagandistic?
No.
I don't, because Vince is crazy. And then it was just the last 20 years have been a Vince victory lap.
Yeah, has been
30 years, whatever it is.
No, I mean, like Ted Turner for him, like WCW is just one bit in a giant media empire. Like,
right, yeah.
Another hot take here from
hot.
Hundo Mo. Hot take. Wrestling fans don't actually enjoy wrestling anymore. They're either into the soap opera aspect, he says male soap operas, or extreme violence on TV. The in-ring stuff is not why people watch anymore.
I mean, 700.
I guess the 600,000 to 700,000 people who watch AEW every week probably beg to differ.
That's not an insignificant amount of people. That's a significant portion of wrestling fans right there. I mean, if you take the entire, I don't know, I'm not going to start doing math right now, but that's not an insignificant number right there.
No.
Plus what, 150,000 people plunking down $50 for a pay-per-view?
Yeah. And like WWE's premium live events, predominantly, let's say there's not story beats happening on the show, but are predominantly focused on the in-ring action. So people plunking down money for WWE pay-per-views are watching it to see the stories play out in the ring. Because, that's the in-ring aspect of pro wrestling, is the storytelling in the ring.
What do you think he's referring to when he talks about the extreme violence on TV?
I mean, maybe Swerve Hangman in the cage. I don't know.
I mean, that's what I was thinking too. But I don't know.
That doesn't mean maybe just because on AEW they have people get bust open more often. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard this take before that wrestling fans don't enjoy wrestling. We've heard the take that the least interesting part of wrestling is the wrestling. And I mean, look, that is certainly, for a lot of people, and if you look at the Attitude Era, a lot of those matches on Monday Night Raw, they were like 2-3 minutes long. 6 minutes long, where they might have a main event that was like 12 minutes long.
Maybe.
And so, look, I understand that, the characters. You and I always say it's the characters and the stories, and it's not. And the in ring helps inform all that.
Well, like what happens out of the ring should inform what happens in the ring, which should then inform what happens next out of the ring. There's, however you want to break it down, there's multiple facets to the art form that is professional wrestling, one of which is the in-ring storytelling aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can watch Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite, get into the stories as they exist outside the ring, and enjoy it fine. There's people who probably could care less about the stories that take place outside of the ring. They're more concerned about the stories that take place inside of the ring. That's fine. There's not a right way to enjoy pro wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't even know about it.
I mean, if you look at like WWE, where I know there are people who break down how much actual in-ring wrestling there is, and yet it's the highest watched, form of pro wrestling in North America, at least.
And then people who say no one cares about wrestling will point at that dad and say, "Ha, we're right."
Yeah, right. And so I don't know. I think that there might be a pie chart out there that you can look at that says this is what people really like about wrestling. But I guarantee you, the in-ring stuff is going to be a not insignificant portion of that pie chart.
Yeah.
Possibly Blitz says, not every character or story needs to be very long or in-depth Shakespearean epics. Triple H has done a lot of great work, but I think a lot of fans misinterpret it as every character needs a godfather, when some people don't even need a Weekend at Bernie's 2, and that's okay. Okay, number one, if they made a Weekend at Bernie's 2, but within the context of Monday Night Raw, count me in, because that is grim, but also hilarious. It'd be pretty wild.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty wild.
It makes for some interesting matches. See, that's definitely one case where I want to tune in for the match part.
I want to see the in-ring. There is that fact or fiction beyond belief where the dude wrestled a dead guy for 60 minutes. Yeah.
For like 60 minutes.
For Broadway.
Variety is great. We saw when Triple H was booking NXT, so many of the characters were kind of too similar. There wasn't enough variety in terms of the characters being presented on TV. And yes, while the matches were fantastic, it made the programming on a weekly basis not the most interesting per se.
Right, yeah.
It's all a balance. Mm-hmm, you got to have a balance of the stories that you take time to unfold with the rich characterization. You can have some comedy stuff. You can have some shorter form stories that don't, take months and months to tell. It's all just a balance of all that would kind of make like a winning combination. I don't think anybody is saying every story on Raw or SmackDown needs to be told over the course of 3 years. Sometimes long-form storytelling is 3 or 4 months.
Here's what I think every segment of television needs, and that's an attention to detail and a plan for what's going to happen next. And that plan can be something that lasts 3 weeks. It could be something that lasts 3 months, one pay-per-view cycle. It could be something that lasts 3 years. When you look at, for example, The New Day and Final Testament, there was a story there that they decided to tell about 4 months deep into the run. And prior to that, it was like, there's not a lot going on here. But eventually they got around to some story. It was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then what happened. But, I agree with this. But I think that the one thing that maybe fans who think they want the big epic saga for everybody, I think maybe what they really want is just, hey, show us that you're moving these stories along and that there's an emphasis on what is going to happen and don't spin your wheels. And I think people would be super satisfied if those stories only took 3 months to tell and then get out of there.
Yeah, totally. Depending on the nature of the story, for sure. I mean, as long as every story has stakes and there is a sense of urgency for the characters within that story. I'm not saying the story has to be told with any sense of urgency, full stop. Depends on the story.
Yeah.
But the characters have to have their motivations. They have to operate with some measure of urgency, and there has to be actual stakes involved. And whether that's a 2-year story, a 2-week story, I kind of feel like those are the things that need to be constants. If there's no stakes, what are we going to invest in?
Yeah.
If there's no urgency, then it kind of feels like you're spinning wheels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. The Gecko 1742 says, if wrestling is cinema, AEW is more akin to Marvel than Scorsese films. Ultra-violent matches and constant flips equals CGI spectacle. Their hot take is, that's beautiful. My favorite film last year was a Marvel movie, Across the Spider-Verse. It's also why Gunther is my favorite. His matches are less about spectacle and more about winning. There's a lot of
the spectacle of him chopping the hell out of people and having their chest turned to hamburger. That's some spectacle.
That is some spectacle. That spectacle.
I'm not going to argue about what genre or studio's film is the equivalent of AEW.
I would, dude. I'll do that. I'll indulge. Why not?
All right.
AEW is like John Wick movies. In that,
well, here's the thing. I think AEW, the stories AEW tell, run a broader gamut than strictly Hollywood tentpole stories, and that's kind of why I brought up this course. Literally, I was just trying to think of one director's works that has movies that were comparable to the Texas Death Match and the Cage Match.
I don't think. Here's the thing. If I'm going to indulge in this, I'm going to separate it from your analogy because I think you were comparing two singular matches with two singular Scorsese films.
That's all
and I think that's
yes.
an apples and oranges.
Not AEW as a whole, no.
I'm not lumping in your metaphors, and because I like those analogies. I thought they were good. I'm talking about in general, right? John Wick has story to motivate some really great matches, right? WWE, on the other hand, has, I think, more along the lines what you just said, sort of like stories that motivate matches, that motivate more story, that motivates more matches. And I think AEW is a bit more akin to, hey, this one ingredient is what we're really going to focus on. We're the best wrestle. And that's going to motivate some story just to motivate a lot more of that one ingredient, which John Wick does wonderfully, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Or like George Miller's Mad Max movies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a great example as well.
Those are, not to say there's not rich characterization or stories or themes of depth not happening there. There are. But it is, what unites it all is these massive action set pieces.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's kind of the unifying factor across all those movies. What is this? DBC says, I'm personally not into this Bron Breakker call-up. It gives me strong Goldberg vibes. I hope they do him well in the long run, though at the moment it just feels about one-dimensional. I don't think there's a whole lot one-dimensional about Bron Breakker.
Hard disagree on this one.
His whole story is kind of the opposite of one-dimensional. He loses and has to learn.
And on top of that, I feel like Goldberg, number one, back when Goldberg was on the ascent, he rarely talked. And when he did talk, he would generally say two words, you're next, or who's next, or whatever it is. There wasn't a whole lot of talking there.
No.
Bron Breakker, in the segments where he does talk,
it's a good promo.
He comes off like an actual human being. He comes across like a fully realized character.
Yeah.
And it might not be the most compelling character to some people because he's not doing much that's flashy in that realm. But God damn it, his acting skills are getting a lot better.
They are.
He's finding who he is as a character, and some of it is pretty. It's entertaining stuff. I enjoy when Bron Breakker's on the screen these days. I enjoyed Goldberg back then to a different degree, in that it was kind of entertaining. Number one, Goldberg, in my opinion, did have a certain charisma that other people wanted to have, and were pushed, and they just didn't have it. There was something about Goldberg that the fans really latched onto, and then they properly put him in there and just had him smash everybody. I don't see that with Bron Breakker. I really don't. I think they do have a story for Bron Breakker, and it's exactly that. Going back to NXT, the guy loses, then he figures it out, and he wins. And I don't know if they're going to continue that thread of his career. But so far, I really like what I've seen with Bron Breakker. I think it is more interesting and more complex than what they did with Goldberg.
And Alex Foster says, for a good while, 205 Live was WWE's best show. And then Stu Walbaum here says, WWE needs another Cruiserweight Classic. Of course, Cruiserweight Classic led eventually to 205 Live. Here's a reason that 205 Live for a while was WWE's best show. It's probably the one Vince had the least to do with. Wasn't Adam Pearce booking 205 for a while?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
I mean, from the wrestling perspective, it was probably the best show they had on a weekly basis.
Yeah,
it was
but NXT existed. NXT was prime when it existed.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I don't know. I mean, we used to review those in one block. We used to review those bundled up together. And I liked 205, but it was definitely the most kind of like nothing's really happening here show.
If you liked really good matches, that's you watch that.
They did
NXT.
have good matches, yeah.
That's what you watch.
And then, but NXT had like, boy, these are the matches. These are good.
Yeah. As far as another Cruiserweight classic, the wrestling landscape is completely different now.
Mm-hmm.
There's AEW. They're obviously employing a lot of people who would probably be considered for another Cruiserweight classic.
Mm-hmm.
The independent scene's vastly different. Scene around the world is completely different. I don't know. I just don't know how feasible it would be to find 16 or 24 or 32. I mean, I'm sure you could. Unsigned Cruiserweights. You absolutely could.
Yeah.
But to find a field that has people with brand recognition, up-and-comers, like, I just don't know. Like, the landscape is so vastly different now.
Here's why I'm not in favor. I'm not even in favor of Cruiserweight divisions, because you're always going to end up with a Finn Balor or Rey Mysterio, which you really want to see move up into the heavyweights. And then how do you justify it? It's like, it's pro wrestling. It doesn't have weight classes, and it shouldn't have weight classes. And so I would thoroughly love for them to do something more akin to the X division, where it's not about the weight class. It's about the innovation in wrestling.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, well, if you get like a bigger dude or anybody, any of them, and they really get over with the crowd, okay, then put them into that, into the mix with main roster, NXT or whatever. But I'd be down for a division, a Netflix show, whatever, where it's just about, okay, innovative wrestling. I think that could be really cool.
Agreed. Dylan Lang here. This one, you're going to like this one, Steve. Tag team wrestling is thriving right now across the board. The fans just don't like it because all teams are either heel teams that don't defend every week because they're heels, or aren't new and exciting darlings to the hardcore fan base. Dylan brings up Unholy Union or Chased You. Do you feel like tag team wrestling is thriving right now?
No.
Can you name me one interesting story that's being told with tag teams, Steve?
No.
The closest I can think of is the story with Axiom and Nathan Frazier, where they're tag champs, but their focus is not being a tag team.
They're both tag team they're tag team champions who really deep down want singles gold. The New Day, 13, 11, 12, whatever time tag champions they are. And Xavier Woods just really wants to focus on single stuff.
Really does.
Nobody really wants to be a tag team. And therein lies the problem with the tag team. Finn Balor has a solo match at the Premium Live event coming at Bad Blood coming up, and he's a tag team. The tag team in WWE, tag team gold is used to facilitate either sagas or single stories. In AEW, the most popular tag team in AEW just notched their second win on televised AEW programming, or first. I forget if they've had one since the Collision.
If it wasn't last week, was their first. If you're talking about the Outrunners.
Yeah, I thought they had another win, but they haven't had TV
win
since then. Maybe it was in Ring of Honor. I don't know. But they just on Collision, Friday or whatever it was, they had their first televised win, the Outrunners. They're the most popular tag team in AEW because they've kind of just not handled their tag team division all that well.
Nope.
So I'm going to say no on this one.
So it could be a situation where the talent amongst the tag teams is exceptionally high, and I would not argue with that fact. There's so many great, immensely talented tag teams.
Yeah.
Across every promotion. The emphasis on telling interesting stories with tag teams is about as bad as it's been as long as I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's basically no effort in WWE. Barely any in AEW. Of all the weekly regular televised brands, NXT probably has the most interesting tag division.
I don't know about... I suspect Impact treats their tag division okay?
I would think so because they do historically a really good job of treating all their divisions pretty well.
Yeah, they had, there's some equity there. But I don't really watch that, so I can't really say that that's the case. So, yeah, no, sorry. Tag team wrestling right now in 2024, dead. Dead, I tell you.
In the toilet, you say.
In the toilet. Anyways, I think that's a good one to wrap up with. Thanks, everybody, for your hot takes. Again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And yeah, let us know in the comments below what you guys think about all the topics we discussed today. Till next time, we'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.